And 2.0, ordering and approval of agenda.
Motion to approve?
Be no changes, we have a motion to
I'll
approve.
second.
Second, all in favor? All right. 3.0, district reconfiguration discussion. Anybody have any comments they want to start with, or you want to get going?
I'm ready if you are. Okay. We have invited HDK. We've obviously spoken with them before. And Clayton Kelly from Piper Sandler will be here to talk with the board about financial and taxing implications of possible options for the future. So I'm gonna let you guys kind of start the show, and we can make this whatever format you want for questions and answers, discussions, see where it leads. So I think it'd be good to hear from them. They have brought a lot of answers to the questions that I posed to them from our last meeting, and they're prepared to answer questions for you tonight as well on any other things you have.
So we wanted to provide an update, answer all of your questions, and talk about the finance. For the update, just before we get into the questions, just understanding where we're at in that process. We are still in the middle of trying to figure out of what the process will look like if you do capital outlay, how you spend that, and planning that, or a bond issue. That plan still isn't being completely decided, so we're not picking something tonight, we're just giving you some more information and talking through that next steps.
We went through and the questions that we were given, just very directly, the question and then what our answer is, so, you'll have everything you need hopefully.
And we also reorganized them to try to help make it so we're building on the information. So the first one is exploring one campus configuration and all the facility needs on there. And then as well question 2, what are the options on how that can be demonstrated to show that? So we've revised this concept from when we were here last to allow for the middle school edition, working directly with the high school. We've gotten that down to where we don't have to do as much of an addition. So the blue is the addition, the yellow is the renovation, and this shows what was in that scope of work that we had before. So the new elementary school, previously it was shown over the annex, but this is moving it over, showing how a playground could be on the backside, the ball fields over here. This shows reworking the circle drive with the buses, and so we can expand in more parking there. And then it has one softball and one baseball. There are a lot of other things that you can do that have come up and we've talked about, and later on, to answer some of the other questions, we have another breakdown on showing this. So like these things are tallied up here, and this option with these pieces shown on the left is around that 50 million. That doesn't include the turf, football, or wrestling multi-purpose room. It does have a 4th gym, but this is showing as a practice gym in this configuration. And then we also looked at some options of if we move track and field. There's lots of options and lots more things that we can build on it, but this first part is this plan here. It did include the expanding the band room.
Can I ask the next question?
Yeah.
And so I reached out to them and we've discussed a little bit of this before, but so this is, you've kind of taken some measurements, making sure everything can fit.
Yep.
You're seeing that we do have the space with some extra space to spare.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we work directly with the civil engineer. This is all scaled.
So that did include 4 gyms.
It has 3 at this site. And I'm sorry. It has the dome, the main one, and then 1 gym.
And then there's
And then one in the grade
pre-K
school.
And then
center.
1 in the grade school, yes,
The 4th gym is a practice gym, not a
competition.
competition gym.
Is that the new one on the bottom?
Yeah,
So they moved that 6, 7, 8 type wing from that end cap there where the grass is now over to that front entrance piece on the front end of the building. Did you guys see that?
So in the yellow then?
No, the blue up front, right there,
Okay, yeah,
right there.
that,
Some classroom spaces in there. Can you talk about how many classrooms you have there
Yeah,
and then
I've
shared
got
spaces?
some more plans that will
Okay,
show that
okay.
in large.
We should zoom in on it here in a little bit, that way
Oh,
you
good,
can see it
okay.
better.
So this is just a plan of all the classrooms that we need for the middle school, and how they can share with the high school. Previously, the concept that we had, it was around the same cost, but it had all of that middle school being new construction. And we worked more into how we can make some adjustments and renovations, trying to get the cost down. It's cheaper to renovate something to build it all new, and it's a better use of your space, so that's something that we're worked through, to get closer on the plan. So this is more enlarged at just the high school building, where we're showing practice gym and locker rooms here. The band room, renovating that and, expanding it to about double the size that it currently is. This is also showing a kitchen addition so we can move it out and then have the serving area be off of the dining area. Some of those, like freezer and refrigerator in there is hard. And then this shows the library moving to where the kitchen was, so it's centrally located, and working through that concept of trying to get like a middle school wing area, and then high school on the back, and then those shared spaces in between the two. So, this has the middle school wing down here, and then classrooms out on this side. So if we combine the offices, there's 3 new classrooms, and then reworking this wing to right sizing those classrooms into rectangles. And
So that's the old library space in yellow there, those top ones there. And the library is a huge space right now, so that's underutilized, I would say.
A lot of them are.
We use it, it's just, there's a lot of space in there to do a lot of different things. You know, we've just kind of still got the same stack concept. We do use it for a lot of variety of things, but placing classrooms in there looks, and then moving the library over there is probably a better use of those spaces.
I like how the middle school, the offices are right beside each other. And it's not on the corner, I don't like that.
And there's more questions that bring us back to that, so we'll come back to that plan. The next questions are about the 2 campus question. If was the possibility of doing remodels for 2 building configuration, I said 2 question, 2 building, and then how does Overbrook or Carbondale play into that? And then question 4 on what additions would be required at Carbondale or the high school. So for the 2 campus model, when we look at the options we've been planning is, in both scenarios, this plan reads across. So scenario 1 is across the top where you repurpose Scranton, Overbrook gets repurposed, and then you renovate Carbondale and do the high school with an addition for the middle school. So this is using Carbondale in the high school in this option.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
The bottom scenario is to use Overbrook instead of Carbondale. Because of the size of that, we would have to do an addition at Overbrook that we wouldn't have to do at Carbondale. And so the cost of that one goes up. And in both scenarios, we're looking at the high school in this current option of like 17.5 million there for that work. And so then it totals at the bottom right for the 2 campus option. So for what those improvements or what those costs include, the Carbondale cost for renovating it has 2.3 million, and that breaks down to the mechanical being 366,000. There's some electrical improvements. the green is showing, the highest area of where we need to renovate some finishes. Have some cost planned for renovating the hallways and doing improvement to the elevator. So this doesn't drastically change the layout or the look of this, but getting down to what those minimum needs are for continuing to use the building, and then some improvements for the grade level usage that would be over here for pre-K through 5. In the alternate scenario, if you used Overbrook instead of Carbondale, the blue has the addition that we would need to put on there for the additional grade levels there. And then, as well as there's 1.4 million in just renovations to that building. Like the addressing some improvements to the parking, restroom renovations, some kitchen improvements, and building finishes.
Can you back to the other one real quick? I just had a, so the green there, is that the like upstairs,
Yeah.
downstairs, or both upstairs and downstairs?
It has, the lower level is like below the plan.
The one on the bottom is-
Oh, that's the, oh,
It's
okay,
shown.
gotcha. Okay, well, I was trying to figure out what building.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yep, and then
And
same thing over
same with on the
this
top
end.
there, that's
It's all
underneath.
that's the best.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry, that's.
Oh, I know we used to have some random building out back.
No,
I was trying to figure out like.
Good question, that's a good question.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes, very good questions. For question 5, what is the complete list of things for the high school? The high school, we worked down to the top 10 needs there. The annex, secure entry, classrooms to a standard shape, kitchen, athletic storage, the water issues at the main office, repairing the dome, humidity in the basement, HVAC, and science labs. What wasn't on this list but was talked about a lot in these meetings was the band room, so we've added that to this list in the costs and the plans.
So just the band room, no wrestling room talk.
Yeah, because the girls are in the basement right now, I just wonder about that being a high priority too.
So we can work through and show other options and add to this, just where we
Yeah.
have. Question 6 is where would the district office be located under the 1 or 2 concept plan? And so in both of the scenarios, 1 campus or 2 campus, we're showing the annex being used for both the CTE and the district office. For the high school building, there's the 3.9 million allocated for improvements at that building and outside of the additions or the middle school coming over. There's some site drainage, the HVAC, exhaust and science rooms, all that top 10 list adds up to the 3.9.
And that structural piece up front
Yeah.
that we've talked about, okay.
This is a study of showing with the rectangle classroom or with the triangle shaped classrooms, what are the scenarios and how we can rework that? And that's something that we've seen and how if you did that at Capitol LA, how would that work? If you break 4 classrooms into 4 classrooms, they're long and skinny. If you break them into 3, they're a lot larger than what you need. So in the concept that we have, we're breaking them into 3, but we're taking the outside wall and making it part of the hallway for the addition. So on this enlarged plan, that's how this hallway is yellow, is because it's on the inside. And then we're right sizing those classrooms there. And so then when we do the addition, we just do 1 addition on the outside. Classroom width wise.
We still have 8 triangle shaped rooms. Is that right? We still have 8 that would be,
Yeah, so, yeah, and that's something that if you wanted to go in and renovate that and add that, and that became the priority, I think that would be great. Those are some of the next things to work through on what those priorities are.
And over time, those things might change. You know, currently we sit with 3 social studies, 3 science, 3 math, 3 ELA. So there's some spaces that, you know, even one of our ELA classrooms is 2 classrooms. You saw it today. Mr. Gloss's classroom is 2 classrooms. So there's some space in there too that could be used in different ways as well. It's got the book room and the classroom.
On the side, it has the CTE and the district office and the annex in this top view. And then with the shop classroom moving out to the annex, then that becomes some additional classrooms downstairs. So with the top 10 and the band room, that gets to that 17.5 planned at the high school. The question about the water system and if it can support the additional facilities. The civil engineer talked to the rural water district and they said that the capacity was adequate for the addition of the middle school and with the elementary school building. But if we needed to sprinkle the buildings, then they don't think that they have it for the fire suppression. So like you have the big water tank out there now.
And that's not a requirement that you sprinkle it, but sometimes that's can be a priority to a district.
And then parking, how do we address parking and how can that be included? So this plan is now rotated, so sorry about that. This one is from the civil engineer and just to show some of our work of the conversations we've been having with them and looking at different road access and how that would work for as one campus as a whole, and then some base reference points on the distance from the building to the road. They're showing. And then we can get scaled plans to show how it fit all on one building and how costs were estimated. So we've gone through the plan sum and so looking more at the costs on how it's broken down. In construction, everything's broken down into different divisions and the cost of those divisions, you don't have some of them, like building structure, you typically don't have in a minor or major renovation, but you have them in new. And things like demo, you have in the renovations, but you don't have in new construction. So we work through what of these things like roofing or casework or plumbing, HVAC that you have, and then break it down to a cost per square foot. So we're not designing every cabinet and everything right now. A lot of the costs are based off of square foot costs and the level of renovation, that is happening in that space, and then the cost for new construction. And then when you're looking at these items, you need the full cost of it, not just the construction cost of it, but to include all the soft costs. So like survey, engineering, the bond financing, escalation, and contingency. So there's about 20% soft cost on there on the today's construction cost amount to cover that escalation and contingency.
You guys have any questions on that? I know that's a lot of information, so.
Question 10, can a 4th gym be incorporated at the high school to serve both buildings? So previously we didn't have the gym on there, but we've added that in the locker rooms and we've added that as a practice gym. If you wanted to, and so that's a smaller square footage. If you wanted to do a competition gym and have more spectator seating, or you wanted to get more volleyball courts in there, we would need to add another 1.8 million to it.
So for it to be regulation size.
This is size that you could still have games in there, but it would be more like your 8th grade or 7th grade games. It's still a full-size court.
Just you can't
No
host.
spectators?
Yeah, where do
Is it
you,
like
Yeah.
the dome gym now, we can't have,
well, I was thinking, is it more like the Carbondale gym now where you just have like one side of bleachers then, or is it gonna be less seating than that?
So a lot of times in districts this size, like you have the main gym and you have the dome gym, that I don't see a third spectator gym, that they need the practice space, but not necessarily the competition part of it, so that's why we have it in that. If that's not how you need it and you need it to be the spectator gym or how many seats it is, that's something we can work through and we can change it to that. That's just what we have it in there currently.
And currently, we have 5 gyms in the district, if you think about Overbrook and this building as well. This building, we use only obviously for practices. Overbrook only for practices except for Parks and Rec usage with youth games. But they're not used all throughout the year with all of our sports, right? Does that make sense?
So we have
The
3
community,
regulation size gyms though, right?
no, because we can't use the.
we have Carbondale, we have the high school, 2 gyms, you can play volleyball and basketball regulation in the dome.
I thought we talked about that, that's not regulations.
We can't, there's something.
we play volleyball in the dome.
Tournaments or something.
Yeah, we play volleyball in the dome, we play basketball in the
You
dome.
probably have to have a
We can't
certain
host,
capacity.
we can't host certain tournaments.
You couldn't host sub-state or whatever.
Yeah, but we play basketball and volleyball, we play varsity volleyball in the dome. The varsity, the main gym, we have to do side by side, right?
Mhm.
Volleyball courts. So that space between the bleachers, and the end line is why I believe we can't play, some of our postseason tournaments in there. I wish Chris was here. Is that right,
The main-
Austin? Is that right? Okay.
The main gym?
The main gym, yes, the main gym, our old gym.
So then locker rooms at the high school, we've added that to include it, so the locker rooms are included for the middle school. And then, how could we do a new wrestling building, and baseball fields to free up space at the high school? And so that's something that we can do that, add more onto the building. Just would be the cost of doing it. So this plan is showing even more of those pieces. So the wrestling building, one option of it could be placed with the new locker rooms between it and the gym. This teal color is showing that increase for it being a competition gym. This also shows that if we wanted to turf the football, you could do that. This was another thing, if we move the field events, if you turf the football field, you could potentially get rid of your practice field, or slide it, move it, and if you put your field events over there, then you can expand your parking. So this is meant to represent parking. And you still could expand to more parking around this site as well. Was there the baseball and softball, that's included in this, but just one of each. That's something that we see at other districts your size, but if that's something that's a different here that you need.
So, say that we did this, baseball, softball being right there, what about bathrooms and concession, is that all included in this?
That's something we can look at when we're doing the design. We've done this sometimes where we have like just restrooms off of one part of the building that face out, or concessions. We've got a building down here, but maybe that gets placed
More in the middle.
More in the middle, yeah. So question 13, creative solutions for shared spaces, gyms, cafeterias, and auditoriums. We've done that a lot where we'll have the cafeteria also be an auditorium or a gym that also has an auditorium in it. A lot of times you have one that's a primary use, so it's more of a gym that you also have meetings in, or more of an auditorium space that gets hard to do an auditorium and a gym together, but you can put a cafeteria with a gym or a cafeteria with an auditorium.
So for that, we would just kind of talk through what we think your needs are and see how we need to configure it.
The next one is about vertical construction and horizontal in terms of cost and functionality. So we've listed some challenges. You have the high school is all on piers. It's the structural system that goes all the way down to bedrock because of the soil conditions. So if we did that, we would still have to do the piers, but we'd have to have larger foundations. So that would be a challenge for the wider part of the wall to hold the 2-story load. And you would have less site impact overall, but it would be bigger foundations. And then thinking about the 2-story question, if you're meaning to go down or if you're meaning to go up, the high school has a basement level. But if this question is related to any basements, then you could have, struggles with daylight or waterproofing basement walls. It adds stairs and elevators that you wouldn't necessarily have to have otherwise. It seems like it's easier to do it with older level kids. Doing an elementary school in 2-level, we've done, just a little bit harder for some of those younger kids to traverse stairs. So there were 3 more questions, but they were kind of related to next steps. So I thought it might be good to switch to the finance on how these different options.
Before we get into the numbers, is there any other questions that you guys had for Maria on those slides?
I do have one question, another one. Okay, and I'm just thinking of junior high locker rooms. Were those on?
They were next
So-
next to the gym.
Okay, so those were junior high locker. Okay, gotcha. I know, I don't know if we talked about it with you, but I know our high school locker rooms are awful. So I was just,
Yeah.
okay.
So do
I
you
was
have
just
to,
thinking high school.
I have a question, do you have to go through the main gym to get to that other gym then? Is that the only entry point?
In this scenario, yes, but if we looked at placing the gym in a different way, if we wanted to take out parking and then put it in a different way, we can study some different options on what makes sense.
To have an entrance to the gym, you mean?
Well,
Because
From the
if you have a-
outside.
even from the inside or the outside, I'm just looking.
You're wondering, do you have to go through the main gym to get to that other gym?
Yes.
Yeah.
But junior high schedule isn't the same as high
No.
school schedule, and you have a high school gym class going, and you got a junior high gym class that
Mhm.
needs
So
to
you're
start, how do
walking
you
through.
walk through that?
They would go down to the locker rooms first before they come up, and the passing period's the same.
If it is, if it's not, the question is, we're not running block scheduling, right?
Yeah, does this limit
For high
us to
school,
having
yes,
to
but
have
not
the same
junior high.
schedule
we
with
decided.
junior high and high school?
I mean, scheduling would be a whole, based on the uses of space, yeah, we'd have to work real closely. 6 through 12 concept of operations, it'd be a whole different look than 9-12, it would.
And these are great questions, and as we go through this, we can move things around on the side as needed. What we're initially trying to do is kind of show you that there's room, give you an idea what cost is, but yeah, we'll absolutely look forward to input from others to see what will work best on the site.
I don't like the flow of this, I guess, is what I'm struggling with, and I realize we can kind of maneuver, but in my mind, we had kind of a junior high, middle school concept, kind of separate from the high school, but with some shared spaces. This looks while it is still separate, we share, I think we share more than what I guess I had envisioned, as far as hallways, and that would make Bell's schedule, we would almost have to, they would have to almost be the same, right? Versus initially, I think we had the junior high kind of where that gym is, right?
And not necessarily, they wouldn't have to necessarily be the same. You know, we run a 4, 5, and then 6, 7, and 8 separate schedule, right now.
But are you gonna have the bells going off? I mean, that's pretty
I've been in
disruptive.
a lot of schools where it's 2 different sounding bells, and it gets to where I don't think they hear it anymore. Like, they just hear their bell and they get used to it. I've seen it that way several different places.
And I think part of this was to get the cost down significantly from that addition on the other end down there. This has a lot more stuff in it, as well, with the cost being similar to what they proposed in the beginning, but you get all the athletic stuff that you guys have been talking about, in these plans with less construction, to get it all out there for a better price.
So the question about the shared spaces too, beyond like the gyms and the auditoriums, I think it was even really kind of being creative with how we can share as many spaces that are only used part of the day across the board, like labs or music and band and libraries, and like how many of those things could be maximized and not sitting unused at all.
And a lot more.
Yep, and that would be a challenge then too, if you didn't follow the same timeline, so that's something, when I worked with Mission Valley on their last bond issue and trying to understand how that works with that shared space. Like the band room could be used, it's open, you know, at least number of hours that you would need middle school to use it, but if you were trying to schedule them on different times or different bell schedule, that could be a challenge and wouldn't work for that being a shared space, but over building 2 that are the same need and they're both not used amount of times doesn't quite make sense either, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the art room was one that we didn't see an overlap because it's already used
Every hour.
every hour, yeah.
Other questions before we move to finance? And also, as you sit here and other things come up, we're here for you, so.
All right, well, we also have a lot of numbers on ours too, so sometimes when we try to throw that up on the screen, it can be a little blurry and hard to read and can kind of put you to sleep. So we brought a packet for you. Again, my name is Clayton Kelly with Piper Sandler. Really today, what I want to go through is a lot of just kind of information regarding some key figures that we regard as, you know, part of the capital planning, and as you're thinking about these large projects, the opportunity to finance these typically lasts, you know, 15, 20, 25, or 30 years. So there's an emphasis that we take on what assumptions are used. And a big part of that is looking, you know, historically at the district and what that, whether it's assessed valuation, tax base growth, or different key interest rates looks like. So we work with several school districts across the state. We're in this every single day. There's a tab on us in here, and I think really one thing I want to just point out was over the last 5 years, there have been 100 school bond elections in the state of Kansas, and we've partnered with 70 of those school districts on those, and many of those have been with Maria and Elizabeth at HDK. So just we're in this every single day. We're constantly evaluating it. And, we think that there's a lot of just the process that you guys are going through right now, I think is really good. It's not a process that we see a lot of districts take. And what I mean by that is more than ever right now, the thought of the vision for your project is so important. A lot of districts will just look at, you know, we have bonds rolling off similar to you guys. What type of needs can we take care of? And really planning around the tax impact rather than planning around the vision and seeing the different options and considering the different options of that tax impact. So I just really commend you guys in your process thus far, and just wanted to provide some context, tax impact to what you guys have looked at so far. So as I mentioned, tab 1, just a little bit more information on us. Some recent school districts we've worked with in the area, Linden Schools, Silver Lake, Leroy, Gridley, Baldwin, in your area. And then we also typically get that question asked, what is our fee on this? We do not charge anything unless you move forward with a bond issuance, so a successful bond election. And our fee is standard across districts that we work with. It's 1% of the bond financing amount. So I think it's important for us is to be involved in this process throughout, and I think you might find the nickel and diming that we see a lot of our industry, we just don't like it. We want to be a good partner for you as a district, and it doesn't just include this process. Also, just on an annual basis, there's some budgeting that will go into mill levy strategies and how the district evaluates and submits payments on the bond issue moving forward. And so a continual partner in this process, not just for this whatever period of time it is. Tab 2 is really the kind of the key information that I want to start off with, and this is historical information of the district. The key thing that we look at is called assessed valuation. It's your tax base. It's going to determine what the mill levy impact of any potential financing is. If you look at your district over the last 10 years, fairly moderate to pretty good growth rates. I mean, over 4.5% over the last 10 years, and it's increased recently to average about 6.5% over the last 3 years. And so that's information that we use, but we also want to be careful about, since we're projecting out 30 years on a potential financing, do we continue to be that aggressive in our assumptions? Or do we take a little bit more cautious approach so we don't put the district in a position where you go through this process, we share what the tax impact is, and then now you're not necessarily, you might have a couple of years that you're not growing as fast as you have historically, and it puts you in a little bit of a bind in terms of what you communicate to taxpayers. So like I said, we go through this process a lot, and so we really pride ourselves on being somewhat cautious on these assumptions. For this analysis, we're only assuming 1% in this figure moving forward, which even 0.5% or 2% above that makes a big difference. And so there's a lot of districts that are honestly similar to where you guys are at, where they're in a position where they can start thinking about projects well before their outstanding bonds mature, because you have been conservative on the financial plan at the very beginning of the process. So the next page talks about mill levy history. And as you may be aware, the district has really 4 funds internally that make up the entire district levy. And so when we talk about tax impact, we only can communicate as a district what the district levy tax impact is as part of the bond issuance. It's the only one that you guys are in control of. So as we get later on in this conversation, we start talking about what is the mill levy increase, what is the tax increase. It's important to understand that as a patron, you pay city, county, other jurisdiction taxes, and this is just the district's portion of that. So those 4 funds, general 20 mills, that make up your entire district levy. That's standard for all districts across the state. And then you have your local option budget, your capital outlay, which you're capped at 8 mills. But you as a district have done a good job the last about 5 years of maximizing that fund. And then the one that we're talking about tonight is your bond and interest fund. So you can see how that's varied anywhere from 2.7 mils all the way up to 5.1 mils over the last 10 years. And so really it's, when I look at an example of, how have we been good stewards of taxpayer dollars, what can we show towards that? It's really that this district levy of how well you've managed that levy over the last decade. There's a lot of districts that either put themselves in a position where they're not utilizing state dollars and they're not taking full advantage of that capital outlay mills, which you guys are at the 8 mills. And then from a district levy perspective, I mean, really only varying, 2 to 3 mills over the last 8 to 9 years, I think shows a good job for you guys as a board, of how well you've internally managed the mill levy of the district. So just something as a reference, and I'll have different, references, I guess, to what the mill levy impacts to other districts across the state and where this might put you, comparably in, but, I always like to start with this, and I think it's really key to trust in the community, especially as you guys are looking at your vision, and that this is likely going to be a pretty significant mill levy increase in burden from a taxpayer standpoint, but I think the communication and showing kind of what you've done to build that trust in your community, not just from, the vision and the project standpoint process, but also financially moving forward is really important. Tab 3 starts to get into a little bit of cash flows, and I'm just gonna walk through from left to right what each of these figures mean, because there's a lot of them. So just referencing what I showed earlier, that left side is your tax base or your assessed valuation, currently at about 73 million for the district. You currently have one bond issue outstanding, your Series 2013, which matures in 2028. And I think that there's one misconception of new bond issues and new elections. You can layer in bond issues on top of each other. So there's some districts that have, 10 to 15 bond issues outstanding. It's not, you don't have to wait until one bond issue drops off to be able to layer in a new bond issue. But you guys are really at the perfect time to be thinking about that new bond issue, because you have some options here as it relates to, paying it off, as you layer in a new bond issue, rather than waiting until your bond and interest fund drops to 0 mils, and then anything else moving forward is, at this point, at least a 4.3 mil levy increase. So then we have our total debt service column next to your Series 2013 debt service. Those are the same figures, but if you had multiple bond issues outstanding, it would just be the summation of those annual payments. State aid, which is 61%, so the state pays 61% of your entire debt service payment on your outstanding bond issue. Unfortunately and frustratingly, that's gonna drop significantly for your new bond issue. It drops to 11%. So just part of those changes in state funding back in 2015 and 2016 had a huge impact on districts like yourself, where they essentially changed the formula for how they calculate that. And with the 61%, it's based on the median assessed valuation per pupil, is how the metric they use to calculate the wealth of a district in the state. With the change 2015 and 2016, they made it based on the poorest district in the state, which I believe as of today is Galena schools. But what happens is when the formula is based on the median of school district, then you got about half that receive some portion of state aid in the state and half that don't. When you change that formula to now being based on the poorest district in the state, as your assessed valuation per pupil, so your tax base per student increases, you receive less state aid compared to that poorest state. So as your assessed valuation per pupil, or your assessed valuation increases more than that poorest district in the state, every single year it gets reevaluated and you lose state aid. We're seeing 7 to 8 districts a year going to 0% state aid, and you guys honestly aren't probably that far away from being that. So it's really frustrating. I think right now there's about 85 districts in the state that receive state aid. And back in 2015 it was, 180. So hopefully we see some changes there, but in the meantime, we gotta just plan with what we got.
And they are currently evaluating the new school finance formula, so we'll see what that comes up with here in the next year or two, but that's hard to predict.
Yeah.
What that's gonna look like and how they're gonna evaluate big schools, little schools. Talked about medium-sized schools, what does that mean for them? I'm sure you've heard a lot of conversations surrounding that. And then how that affects state aid over time. Because right now we get certain weightings too based on our school population as well, and will those weightings change? So all of that is kind of unknown right now. So I commend you on that's why we make assumptions that are low then on, 1% versus our average sitting around 4 to 6%.
Yep. So the column to the right of that, motor vehicle revenue, it's just another tax base that we pull from to help with the debt service payment. So after state aid, motor vehicle revenues, we then have a column called debt service after both of those revenues to make towards debt service payment. And you're at about a little over $100,000 a year annually on what you have to generate through your assessed valuation to make your payment on your outstanding bond issue. The two columns to the right of that are probably the most important ones in terms of just how you manage your overall district's levy, especially moving forward if you have a successful bond election. The first is fund balance. So as you can see, that grows over time, keeping that mill levy at 4.3 mils for this fund. That 4.3 mils is what is essentially the calculation for saying how many mills does it take to make our payment after state aid and after motor vehicle revenues? Or another way to think about it, we know our payment's $110,000 a year. How many mills does it take to make that payment? That is essentially what this is showing. So it's a pure calculation. There's a lot of confusion. Rightly so, when we start talking about mills, what do mills mean? There's two sides to this. This side is showing what it means to the district in terms of 1 mill generates about $73,000 for you as a district. So I think that's a good reference. But then we'll get into here in a little bit what that means to a taxpayer when we start showing these next couple pages, which show the mill levy increase required to make the new bond payment. So the next page is the same information that was on that previous page, which was status quo. If you didn't do anything, that's what your fund balance looks like. To where if you layer in a project, so if we just hypothetically throw in $53.2 million over 30 years, similar to a mortgage, you have the original amount that you finance plus the interest associated with that over 30 years. So your payment ends up being about double when you do that. So then we just go to that far right column when we plug all this in. What is the mill levy needed to make this new payment after state aid, which is significantly lower, in motor vehicle revenues, which is higher because it's based off of how many mills are being levied. Now your annual payment is about, over the life, around $2.7 million a year instead of $110,000. So it requires about 33.8 mils for this fund to make that payment.
It's a large increase. Right. So he'll break that down then for our taxpayers and what that means.
So this is kind of all and again, going back to some of the previous conversation, assessed valuation growth, assuming 1%, moving forward there. And then we're also cautious on our interest rate assumptions. We're showing 5% here. Current markets, you're probably 4.25 to 4.5. But this could be, we never really know how long this process is going to be before when we're actually able to lock in rates. So we usually take about 0.5% cushion there. The next page shows the mill levy impact if the amount is lowered to 30.3 million. And again, everything stays the same. In Kansas, you have the ability to finance up to 30 years. You can finance any term below that, but what that does, even though it lowers your overall interest cost, it increases the calculation of what that mill is required to make the payment. So this is not, with 30.3 million, it's 19.1 mils to make that payment. So what does mills mean in terms of me as a patron in the community? That's where tab 4 is going to come in handy. So if you go to tab 4, we break both of these scenarios down. The first one we're showing on the left is the 53.2 million. Again, we show it based on a mill levy increase. Patrons are already paying taxes on this, so everything we show is an increase based on what is currently levied in that fund. So it's a 29.4 mil increase for the 53.2 million. On a $150,000 home, the annual impact of that scenario is $508 a year. That's an increase. And everything's proportional, so if you have a $300,000 home, just double it. And we've shown these for both scenarios. For the $30.3 million project scenario, it's a 14.7 mil increase, which is a little less than half, right about half.
So can you explain to us how that works then when the existing bond is paid off? Or if and when paid
Yeah,
off, and how that works within our current
Yeah, great.
financing and future financing?
Yeah, great point, Faith. So, like I mentioned earlier, you guys are in a position where, if you look at your fund balance and your bond and interest fund, you could have the option potentially to drop that to zero, in the future. And so if that happens, you essentially show all of these as the full mill levy increase. So that it would have to be reflected as 33.8 mils for the $53.2 million scenario and 19.1. You don't have the ability to reduce what that mill levy increase is from a communication standpoint, because it's not what they're currently paying in their taxes if you were to drop it to zero. So it increases, at the end of the day, increases what that mill levy impact is. In addition to that, I think the biggest thing, and Maria and Elizabeth have probably already touched on this, I'm not saying this as a reason to push forward as soon as possible, because I really like your process, but it's something to be thinking about, and that's construction costs. And on a lot of these projects that we work on, especially just given the size of them, when you think about the increase in construction costs by waiting to do something, and when I talk about the process, that'll become even more important, because you're now limited, because of new legislation, to the number of elections you can, the timing of elections you can have in a year. So that'll become even more important. So, for the 53.2 million, the 29 mil increase scenario, that puts the district at 79 mils if you don't change anything else in your current outstanding mill levy. The highest mill levy in the state is 75 mils. So it'd be 4 mils higher than the highest mill levy in the state. That's Quinter schools. For the $30.3 million scenario, at the 14.7 mil increase, that puts you at about 64 mils. So for comparison, Eudora schools is at 69, so that'd be 5 mils lower than Eudora. Iola is at 68, that would be 4 mils lower than Iola. And Heston is at 66 mils, 2 mils lower than Heston. And that's not the only ones that are above 64 mils, but similar enrollment, similar assessed valuation. I wanted to give you guys a comparison for kind of where that stands relatively. These next couple pages break down, so you have homeowners are assessed, that property is assessed a certain way, commercial property is assessed about double that, so the increases are double if your property is commercial. And then agricultural land is the last one we show. So we broke this down, and we get these figures from the state. Agricultural is different than homeowner and commercial property. It's not based on your market value, it's based on your use value. So there's always a little bit of confusion when we state what the median use value is of property. It's not the market, the remarket value, but the use value. So for dry crop land, we like to show this broken down by 160 acres. For 160 acres of dry crop land, that 53.2 million would be a $483 annual increase and a $242 annual increase for the $30.3 million scenario. If you broke that down by acre, it's about $3 an acre annually for dry crop, $1 an annual acre, $1 an acre annually for grassland, about half that for the $30 million scenario. Tab 5 starts to get into a little bit of from a timing perspective, Maria alluded to it early in the presentation, but typically that time period is about, I would say, really about 5 months, 4 to 5 months from when you call the election, because you have to have the election called, so the project finalized 3 months prior to an election date. And then we're not locking in the financing for typically another 2 months after that date. So from when you would start the actual calling of the election for the school district to when you'd actually have funds to start projects, it's usually about a 5 to 6 month period. These calendars just show what's needed to call the election prior to the election date. So for a November general election, you essentially would have to have your project scope finalized, including the amount, what you want to do, the ballot language, how you want that written, the financing term, everything finalized before your August 13th board meeting. And then we would essentially, one of the ways I like that districts do this is you kind of have a special meeting before that regular board meeting just to make sure that, you know, everything is finalized and before we bring any resolution to you as a board, and then follow that with, whether that's a week later, 2 weeks later, the actual formal action of calling the election. So again, for a November election this fall, that would be really August 1st or that first week in August of when we would need to have everything finalized to be able to call that election. And we help you throughout this entire process. So this a lot of information, but really the only action for you as a district would be the finalizing the plan, and then the action to call the election. We'll help the district with submitting the application, putting the application together, publications, all that other stuff that's shown in here. So the state, it used to be when for spring elections, special elections, you could call an election really anytime in the spring from, you know, late January all the way through late June. They put a state law change on the ballot that went through that basically now limits school districts to the August primary, which if you want to move forward with an August primary, using this date, this as a guide, essentially by your mid-May is when you'd have to call a special board meeting and have the plan approved. So you have your August potential for an election date, general potential for election date, and then the first Tuesday in March as your other option. So we put together a calendar for that option as well, to give you an idea. Again, just backtracking 3 months. Really, it's that December board meeting is when you'd have to have everything finalized for March. Otherwise, you'd have to then wait until August of 2026 to call an election. We get the question all the time, what are the pros and cons of each? I would say that obviously at a general election or even a primary, really, you're gonna get higher turnout than you would at your special election in March. Could be a pro, could be a con. One thing that I think it really revolves around is your communication from your campaign leading into it. A lot of times at districts, they want to avoid having people voting on their question that they haven't even seen it as part of the campaign. And so the special election, one of the benefits of that is the only people churning up to vote for it actually know what's on the ballot because it's the only thing on the ballot that day. So every district's different in terms of kind of what works for them. I think you as a community are gonna know better than any of us on what makes sense. A November election, because there's other questions on those ballots, it's a free election for you as a district. There's no cost to you as a district, whereas the special there would be cost that you can include in your bond financing as a cost of issuance and repay for. But if the bond fails, you wouldn't be able to. Typically that cost is depending on whether you go mail-in or a walk-in election is $2 to $4 per registered voter. And so yeah, that's really the other difference too, is your August in your general, you're gonna have walk-in versus mail ballot. For your special election, you have either option. Again, pros and cons of each. I think every community is different on that, honestly. We've seen a lot more just walk. It used a couple of years ago, I think probably with COVID going on and everything, there was a lot of mail-in ballots, elections. Now it seems more shifted back towards the walk-in election process. Again, if you go with that special election day, which would be your only option to do a mail-in, there is an addition. It's kind of, when I say $2 to $4, don't hold me to that amount. It's gonna be up to your county to know what that figure is, but your mail-in's almost always double the cost. So the $4 versus the $2 for a walk-in because of mail and postage cost. In terms of, I think you guys have a really good process that you're going through, and so some districts take, a couple of years to get down to a final decision. Some take a couple of months to get down to a final decision. I think kind of you guys are gonna determine that, but I just really want to emphasize what I emphasized at the beginning of this, and your process of focusing on the vision of what you're doing and the messaging for why you're doing it is going to be so important, because at the end of the day, it's, now that you've seen the numbers, it's a significant tax impact for this cost of this project. So I'll leave it at that. I didn't want it to just be me talking the entire time, but happy to take any questions that you guys have.
Thank you.
Whenever you do the special election, if you do the mail-in, don't you can get some feedback too on how, like, the turnout was, that, I've seen that with even, like.
Just like the
The
demographics.
demographics, yeah, that if it
You have
doesn't
to ask that
pass,
prior to the election if you want demographics, which you can do, you can request that, with the county clerk, and they will, or the, election office, they will get you demographics, but you need to, I think you gotta ask what demographics you're looking for, prior to the election.
Okay.
But you can do that, yeah,
It has to be before the election.
yes, it has to be, I don't think you can do it post-election, I've been worried about that, so.
Okay.
Kind of questions do you guys have?
More
A
numbers?
lot of information.
You want to hear some more numbers?
I think, to me, I heard 90, we'd be at 79 mils if we went to 50 mil or 50.
And that's
the
the highest in the state.
by
It's-
4 mils, right?
To be honest with you, I think that, we talked about a steering committee, we need to let them go to work and see what the public's saying. And I may be the only one, but I still don't think we rule out the 3 campus option at this point in time. It's not, what's your opinion on that?
It's worth it to see what people think.
Just-
Right, cause I feel like it's gonna be based on what the public is willing to spend.
Yeah, I think you educate them on where all you guys have been, and maybe they don't touch that one, but at least you're being transparent, giving them everything that is available to them, and you're not making a decision for them.
I think it's gonna be valuable too, that the people that hear from the school, the parents, grandparents, people that are involved, they're probably hearing all this, maybe they read what's going on, they hear from their families what's going on, but there's a lot of people in the community that are taxpayers that aren't in on this communication, and I think a steering committee that's diverse, that can go out and talk to the community about things, will really share the why, because I think there's still people questioning, why are we doing this? We have 4 buildings right now, why are we doing this? I think there's a need to really express your vision and what you're thinking for the future, not just 5 years from now, but 30 years from now. We've reconfigured this district multiple times, and here we are again. So what's your future vision for the district? And then, when you're asking your taxpayers to put additional dollars towards something that we're saying will hopefully save money in the long run in operations based on what our projections are for enrollment, and then the cost that we have, what does that sound like and look like in cost savings in the future? I don't know if everybody at this point in time understands the declining enrollment issue we're gonna have. and trying to keep open 4 buildings, paying for 4 buildings and sustaining 4 buildings with significant loss in students. And why are we losing students? I think we need to talk about that. There's a variety of reasons, and it's not just Santa Fe Trail. I think we need to talk about our transitions and really be student forward in our conversations. I know the money is really gonna lead a lot of the conversations because those are big dollars. But what you as a Board of Education and the families here want for their school district and what that looks like, what are the student decisions that we're looking at? Those transitions we've talked about, we go from preschool to K-3 to 4-8 out to high school. We've got a chopped up system that's caused some significant, concerns with teaching and learning, cohesion, just some things that we believe, I think you all believe need cleaned up a little bit. And then, at the end of the day, that one campus concept that we keep going back to, the ease of those operations, how that feels in a one campus place, but then what that means for the elephant in the room, school closures or school repurposing. And I know for our little towns, that's a hard pill to swallow. And asking anybody to do that doesn't always feel good. Other people are okay with it and feel like, you know what, all these 3 towns were close enough and that out there, it feels close and that's okay. So you're gonna hear, you guys need to be prepared to hear a lot of different opinions and thoughts and feelings about all of that. And I think we need to hear that. I think that'll be important with the steering committee to drive some of this. And we've heard some already. We've had people show up already and share their feelings and expressions about our town schools. But other districts have done this too. They've had to. When you get in smaller rural communities, those things have happened and they're hard. And they've also happened in big school districts where you lose your community schools. But repurposing options are also more palatable. What could we do with these buildings? How could these buildings be valuable to our communities in other ways? And I'm just coming to you as a superintendent with the recommendations based on the information I have. And the main concerns I think that I've brought to you are declining enrollment and then the massive amount of feedback we got in the 8 town hall meetings about our transitions in student learning. So with that, I think the public needs to help guide and steer the direction in which we're going, so.
I think we also need to look at that. I know these are just like an estimate of numbers, but also like what can we spend out of capital outlay towards this? What grants are out there to help pay for things like this?
How could we get some costs down?
Get some costs, yeah.
And there's scenarios they haven't even, talked to us about that are possible with other things. 3 campuses, we've kind of moved away from that, but maybe we need to look at that again. The possibility of, maybe, there's a way, Stephanie, you've talked about partnerships and things like that, so. There's probably a lot of conversations still to be had. But I also know that, if a bond falls off, right, and those are significant dollars that help the district keep up with the facilities we have with loss of revenue, how can a bond, support the district in a smaller capacity as well? And I don't know that, that kind of goes away from vision, which is what Clayton was talking to us about. That kind of goes into not losing certain bond dollars that then we could use for repairs and things that just can't be paid for out of capital outlay every time. So more significant expenses on very aging buildings, especially the high school, and those needs, that laundry list of high school needs that we have. So that's an option too, based on what the community is gonna talk to you about. So there's lots of options and possibilities, so.
I can quickly hit on these last couple here. This first one, I think we've already discussed. Next steps, do we need to talk to a steering committee? I think that a lot of us are in agreement that that's the right thing to do. There was a question about whether we take a couple of concepts to the voters. It's a little tough when these are so different. A lot of times when we see 2 questions, it's about that gym or about the softball fields. Something that we worry might deter the public, but with these options being very different, I think it's gonna take away from your vote. and how do the two concepts best lend themselves to productive steering committee work? Faith could have mentioned it, but there's that balance between how much the dollars are and what's the best thing for the district. Ideally, I think it'd be great if you guys could do one campus and put every single amenity that you want there, but that's probably not feasible. So is it more based on cost? Is it based on what's ideal? What's the mix in between that? And so that's kind of what we would talk to the steering committee about too.
And at this point, we have sent out an interest form for the steering committee. We've got 30 plus people interested in serving on the steering committee. It's a pretty diverse group. There's a couple areas that I think we could bolster in the demographics of our steering committee. So I think it would be good for us to make some decisions on how we want to finalize our steering committee and then maybe set some dates that we would drive this. They've kind of guided me a little bit on 3 to 5 steering committee meetings where we make some meetings very pertinent in what each meeting is about and have some real good explicit objectives of each of those meetings. So we're not just having meetings to have meetings, but we're having meetings with specific purposes that guide the board on where to go before we have to submit all this lovely paperwork that Clayton's talking about for our December deadline. If we are gonna run a bond, if that's where the steering committee drives us. If not, that's a different direction. But if that is a timeline that we're trying to get to as an election, then I think that March probably sounds a little bit more, I think, time consideration that we might need to give you guys time to really listen and meet with the public on some options.
So we talked about, obviously the interest forms have been sent out, so potentially evaluating those, but then if each board member has 2 people that they think would be a great addition to this committee, to submit those names to Faith. And, you know, one of the things we talked about is making sure that's a diverse group. You know, it can't be just my friend group who thinks exactly like I do. We need to make sure we're representing everybody and all the communities. I mean, that's another opportunity and challenge that you guys have, is all the communities.
So do you want to task me with kind of bringing to you a draft
I think.
recommended committee?
You recommend what you got,
Okay.
everybody's fine.
All right.
You want board members on it, or do you want?
Yeah, and
to
so
make
if you-
Special meetings and the whole board be there, but.
And there's a couple ways I think we could do that. We could either just roll with straight 3 if you want to represent the steering committee, and then we have a good feedback loop where you get the information from the steering committees. We could do it where you guys could rotate if you want few of you to go to some and others, and we could keep a feedback loop, or we could call special meetings every time we do that, and you can all be there. So there's different formats we can do, I know, but it is a time commitment. I'm gonna tell you all right now, just very honestly and directly, that this takes a lot of work. And this is the work that the board is gonna have to drive. This is not the Faith Flory show. This is the community and this Board of Education guiding and leading the direction of this district. And it does take time. It's gonna take research and commitment. It's gonna take good listening. So that commitment is gonna be a heavy weight on your shoulders. You guys are parents and you have families and things like that. So we probably need to make some decisions about those commitments that everyone's willing to make. And if we wanna share that load by rotating through them, or everybody's all in and we're all gonna go and call special meetings, or if you wanna suggest 3 of you now that you guys are gonna represent the board. But I think we probably need to make a decision on how that's gonna go and then get our dates set, so we don't have to keep,
You
just.
can also call a special meeting, and if only 3 show up,
Sure.
3 show up.
Yeah,
It's the same
absolutely.
thing, too.
Yep. You can also consider that, you know, there's the steering committee portion of it, but then once a recommendation has been made, there'll be some town halls. And a lot of times we do see more board members at those town halls to hear the larger feedback from anyone in the community.
Sure.
So something to consider too. If you want to be a part of it but not take on the whole thing, maybe you consider doing the town halls.
Well, and if you're talking 5 or 6 meetings, that's 5 or 6 extra meetings. It's gonna be hard for 7 people to make work.
Yeah, we can't find a date.
We were thinking 3 to 5.
Yeah,
We were thinking 3 to 5, and I think if we can get those done before, if we can do these in the summer, and get this done before the end of October, make that,
Is this
how long is
something,
this?
would everybody like to attend one, or does some people not care, they just
Well,
want to fill in?
my concern with it being different is that you're not hearing all the content.
Sure, of
Right.
course.
And so you're skipping around, then you may have things to fill in the gaps that were maybe, answered in the meeting before that,
Yeah.
so I have a little bit of concern with it being
I agree
not
on
the
that.
same continuity of board members, you're losing that continuity with
Sure,
that.
yep, that's a good point.
But that being said, that is a big task for somebody to take on, or a few people to take on.
That's
Because,
what I'm saying, if we did a special meeting, even if only one showed up, it's not gonna matter. But the people that could make it that day, they're welcome to be everyone if they want to. Does that make any sense at all? It doesn't obviously, it doesn't say you have to go, I don't care if you win.
We need to vote on that right now, who's gonna,
I think we need to probably make a decision about the steering committee,
Like
Would-
dates, or what do you mean?
like how we're gonna do it, board member, I think board representation, we probably need to make some decisions on that. I think that will be valuable to decide as we're gonna get going, I'd really like to start in June probably.
If you can make it, make it. If you
I
can't,
kinda-
you can't.
So do we wanna pick two that, okay, these two are following it, but we're gonna have an open meeting and we can make those two make the schedule with the steering committee? And then whoever else can make it, or else we're gonna lose the continuity, and maybe that's okay, cause our meetings are streamed and.
If we're gonna move forward with the bond issue, we're gonna have to make some dedication
Commitments. Yep,
regardless.
we are.
It's
Yep, it's gonna
be
take
tough. It's gonna be tough on everybody.
Yeah, this is a
So,
commitment.
I do, now that you mentioned the streaming, I do kinda like Tanner's idea. Like if we call special meetings and then those who can show up in person be there, but if we can't, then we can watch the live streaming. Cause we wouldn't live stream it otherwise, right? If it wasn't.
I mean, we could
a
record
board
it.
meeting.
We can record it, I mean, it's up to you, it's however you wanna do it.
We don't have to have a quorum. No votes will be done at a steering committee, but if more than 3 board members are there, we'll have to have an official meeting because it's
You
really
have to stream it? If-
We don't have to,
No.
we don't have to stream it, but we can.
I think
Also though, I didn't
like
think
one
about-
one reason to not have everybody at the board meeting is just so that this is a community group and no one feels like it's a board driven group. That if we have, it's the community input and you guys are still making the resolution, it comes down to what you're doing, but just to have that community aspect.
What formats have you seen done, I guess, with board representation on the steering
Typically, it's
committee?
the three, you have
Three.
3 people that are dedicated to doing that, and then we still have meetings with the board, because the board still has to come along and have the same information.
And many times, somebody from that 3 will come back and kind of report back to the board about what they heard or saw. The intent is to make sure that, the steering committee doesn't come back and say, we'd like to go this direction, the board says, okay, well, we've already decided to go this direction. We wanna make sure that that communication's happening.
I think if the whole board was there, we need to realize we're there to listen. I mean, we're forming the committee to get their feedback anyway, right? Just whatever everybody wants to do, I'm fine with.
Is there anybody on the board that you definitely wanna do it?
Makes me a difference whether.
I guess it kinda makes me no difference.
I feel like I would like to, but knowing we all have to be
I mean,
Depending on the time too, I feel like, well, steering committee too, we're gonna have to look at like who's on that too, like when everyone can be available.
Well, I'm gonna tell you this right now, so here's the thing, I'm not gonna go to 30 people
I know, that's.
and ask them their schedules, we're gonna set meetings, and I'm gonna say, you've all been invited to be on the steering committee, we'd like you to be there. And I will tell you, out of the 5 meetings, there'll be people that can't come and won't show up, there'll be any given meeting, so when you invite 30 people to come, 20 might come. When you invite 50 to come, 30 might come. So I say we just set the meetings, here's the dates, you've been invited to be on the steering committee, you're representing these groups that you've issued to us, and here's the town that you've told us you're representing. We'd love for you to come to, here's the dates, please show up, here's where we'll be, here's what time. And we get as many people as we can engage as possible, I think that's best we can do, otherwise we're trying to balance 30 people's schedules, that's impossible. It's hard to do 7 of you, let alone 30 people. So I say we set the dates and the people that are really interested and passionate about coming, they come. And then we talk about it in board meetings too, so then they know what's going on and keep people informed. And I can do written pieces too, like I can get just a communication segment going on just about what our steering committee's doing, what our bond looks like if that's happening, if we're not moving that direction, what direction we are moving. So that's on me then, as superintendent, to push that out to the community.
Okay, well, what I was saying was, when we pick our steering committee, go to those people and see what their schedule looks like. So we can say, if we need to meet on a Saturday, if we can make that happen, rather than doing a Wednesday night, I'm saying.
Seven together, let alone 30.
Well, like you
You're
said,
not
the
saying
thing is like we're just gonna
Talk to
have
30 people, huh?
But I think that was the point, like we're just gonna have to set dates and say this is when they're gonna be.
Well, I know, but I'm saying, we're not trying to get 30 people's schedules, I just meant like who were, which people we choose.
How many do we plan on being on a steering
Yeah,
committee?
I guess that's the question.
Well, I kind of mulled this over with them a little bit, I think, in my mind, we were thinking about 10 to represent each community, Scranton, Carbondale, and Overbrook, but have a representative group of that, knowing that not all those people are gonna show up. So if we're shooting for 30 to 40 people, 30 to 40 people probably aren't gonna show up to every meeting. So then that kind of brings it down a little bit, but you also don't wanna get too many people either.
Right,
You
right.
get too many people and you got a lot of voices, but
People can get scary.
yeah,
Um,
but there's strategies and, how you set up your
Yes.
meeting times and whatnot, so.
So
we
what,
talked about like 5 or 6 from each town, like
But we're also
looking
gonna have,
at
sure,
like a farmer or a parent or, I
Yeah.
thought we had kind of a list of.
I do, but that's not all who's signed up so far. So if our group that I have right here is not representative of you, that you feel enough, we can go out and try to recruit that as well, but,
again, if the board members wanna suggest anybody.
yeah, you guys can do all that. I just haven't been given a lot of names yet, so.
Okay.
Tanner, there's, got raising his hand.
Yeah, I don't, what you got?
Well, first of all, I'd like to put my name on the steering committee if that's possible.
Have you seen the form out there? I can
No, I haven't.
get it to you, because there's a couple things I'll need information wise.
Also, you mentioned the 3 different towns, but you're forgetting people like me who are in the rural area. I mean, my kids.
But you have an address.
I have an address, my
Yes.
kids, back when it was junior high in all the towns, my daughter was the last one to go to 8th grade in Overbrook, that class. I have 2 grandkids right now in the district.
So I just get
So-
people's address, and that's kind of where I've
Okay.
delineated the what town you're representing.
I've lived out here for 30 years, I know Tanner. So, yeah, I'd like to be on the steering committee,
Absolutely.
and as far as adapting to people's schedules, I think if it's important enough for them to be on the steering committee, it ought to be important enough for them to make time
Make
to
it
be at the meetings.
Sure.
So I don't think I'd worry too much about everybody's schedule, I think they need to adapt their schedule to be at the meetings.
Yeah, we're broke up into those districts already, basically. I mean,
So there's some questions on the form, and you'll be able to provide me with some demographics about yourself.
Okay.
You'll be able to say I'm a parent, non-parent, community member,
Parent,
kids, or so.
grandparent.
Yeah, so you can choose a bunch of things, that helps me kind of decipher the representation we've got.
Where do I get this form?
I'll get it to you. Are you on Facebook by chance?
No, I am not.
Okay, okay.
Can't stand it, sorry.
Why don't you give me your email?
.burt@sbcglobal.net, Burt, B-U-R-T.
You want us to just board members?
Plus what?
Or
If-
or you still
If
want
are
us
we
to-
trying to do, we have 3.
I'm also new.
Hold on, let me finish your email, sorry. Raymond?
Burt,
Yes.
B-U-R-T, at SBC.
Yeah, but still, I mean, if they're all, are you sharing the list with us of who?
It was on the.
It was on.
It's on what? right?
So,
Faith,
as
what
we
is
look
the-
at the board members, do we have three that are just, that have
I'll
to do
get
it?
to,
Or,
yes, that's what I would.
cause I was asking Tanner, do we need one from each town? Like, in other words, if we're doing that.
A board member from each town, I think that's smart, yes.
That way we have representation, and I know if we have an at-large, that, I think that fits in any of them. But,
How many of you want to be on it?
It's not that.
1, 2.
I know, I
mean,
do,
like,
but.
no, I don't mean, I
No,
mean,
it's
like,
for another thing.
you want to, as a look back, that you can commit
I don't mind either.
to the,
That's my struggle internally, because yes, this is incredibly important to me, yes. My kids' stuff incredibly important to me too, so it's a struggle for me to go back and forth with
Sure.
it, so. Summer is our busiest time.
Yeah, I get it.
And that's my internal struggle right now, so.
Yeah. Same.
Well, that's why, I mean, that's what I guess I still think we should just call a meeting, cause if you can be there and you want to, you should be able to.
I feel like I don't
It feels like pretty important.
want to be a burden on Amy.
Yeah, but I can also, because it's not a typical meeting, you can appoint different subs to kind of,
It just can't be Kaylee.
yeah. So
Yeah,
if other people wanna come in and take
well, that's fine.
minutes
Just a challenge
for
if you want.
meetings, you can do that, but
why don't we do the first one, it's just 3 people, and then after that, we
See how
decide
it
from
goes.
that meeting, how it goes, if we wanna have more, and then we just call a meeting. Do you think that'd be less intimidating if we did that? Just have 3 go to the first one, and then set the stage, and then maybe after that, if we wanna call a meeting, say this is the format we wanna keep, we're just calling a meeting somewhere.
Yeah, maybe it's still preliminary, or maybe the last meeting we all need to meet.
Yeah,
Is it
we
like-
call it any time, we don't have to call it
Right.
now.
Right.
It's
I think we need to
intimidating,
set some
maybe if we're
tentative
like,
dates.
So I'm
if
hearing-
we're just sitting in a cafeteria table versus that.
I'm hearing about 4 of you feel pretty confident about commitment, and not as many time constraints. Is that correct? You and you, those 4?
I don't know who you.
You say 3 or 4?
I
You wanna
heard
do-
4 that I didn't hear as much time.
As much availability.
I mean, I
Issues.
feel
Yeah,
like it's just gonna have to make it a priority.
So
Yeah.
one thing you can do as far as the timing goes, a couple things. It's nice if you have a couple of kind of chairs of this committee that will then move into hopefully a campaign committee. But get with whatever those couple of board members are and whoever, if you identify those chairs, and check their schedules first, because they are your biggest priority. And then go forward after that. You can also set the first meeting now, and then at that next meeting, just kind of gauge availability. It's sometimes hard to make a group decision, but you can not make everybody happy, but you can kind of gauge people's availability.
Set all dates. Set them now.
That's right.
And then if we turn them into board meetings, I think we turn them into board meetings, but I feel like if we just set the date, say it's the 3rd Thursday of every month, or whatever it's gonna be, or meet twice a month, I feel like if we try to, every meeting, it's, cause we're trying to get 3 of us together for negotiations, and
Yeah,
it's
it's proven to be nearly impossible.
tough. So, like you, to your point.
I like the 3rd Thursday of every month. I like it, Justin.
Thursday maybe
Thursdays.
Mondays.
Right. Because sometimes there's a busier night of the week for people, and sometimes that's later in the week. Thursdays.
Good Mondays?
Yeah. I miss a lot of simple Mondays and Wednesdays already.
Tuesday? Tuesday's okay.
And
Thursdays, like I
Third
said.
Thursdays
Tuesdays
look pretty good.
See, look at that. Decision, Amy. We
You're
got it.
full of stuff.
So are we starting in June? Are we starting in May?
May 15th, I don't think, are you available? I think May,
It's right after the board meeting, so we have a board meeting on the 14th and then the
Start as soon as you
15th.
can, especially if you wanna make decisions.
Should we do
by
it on
August.
this Tuesdays better than Thursdays?
The only issue I have with the May one is that I've got to contact all these people, let them all know they've been asked to be on the steering committee. I'm trying to close out a school year here. I'd almost wanna do the 4th Thursday in the May and then move to the 3rd if possible, just that gives me a little more time to get the school year over. But I can do it, I can rock and roll, I just gotta get all these people contacted.
Maybe the 22nd.
It gets school
Skates,
over.
softball, track, whatever.
It's regionals.
Yeah.
Regionals.
maybe, we don't know what days we'll play on.
We know it's Monday and Tuesday for those
So
Oh,
the
we're not on
22nd and 3rd.
regions.
I don't care, I was just throwing dates out.
Yeah, we can absolutely, I can shoot for that, that's,
I think
had Monday. Tuesday,
2
Wednesday,
weeks is
Thursday.
tough to get folks identified, I think give them an extra week, but then after that,
So
it's
then
where
we're
to set up, but I don't know, maybe it's not.
May's the long month, so we did the 22nd and then.
yeah, we could go all the way to the,
Then that still puts you 3 weeks in between each meeting, so it's a good time frame.
May 22nd, start with that one, and then we'll roll from there on the third Thursdays of each month.
So are we identifying 3 or are we making these a meeting?
Let's roll 3 on May and then we'll call a meeting in June if we decide after the May meeting, cause it'll be after our board meeting in June, right? So we can discuss in the June board meeting if we wanna call a special meeting or if we wanna just roll with 3 again. So May 22nd should be 3 people.
Is there
And
limits between there to call a special meeting? You have to have a certain number of days.
2 clear days notice to not sign a waiver of notice in time notification, so I could notify you on Monday that there's a meeting on Thursday, Tuesday and Wednesday are my 2 clear days. So that's how that notification works.
So June 11th to June 19th, we wouldn't have to sign waivers. Yeah, so we would have plenty of time
Yeah,
between
plenty.
June
Yep.
11th and 19th. So I think in May 22nd, we pick 3 and then June 19th, or whatever we roll with, either a meeting or based on what we take from there.
I like it. All right, who's the 3 that are available on the 22nd?
Jamie, I could be there.
Not everybody can be there.
Yeah, our boys
What do our,
Today,
have a
we did-
baseball game.
are we wanting to do Scranton, Overbrook, and Carbondale and do 3?
Yes.
Okay, so
3 kids.
Scranton people, raise your hand, Scranton people. Okay, it's between you two.
She said she could do it, so
Okay.
she's in.
All right.
If we stick with the Thursday, but if
I mean, I'm gonna have to do something with, between 3 of them.
Okay, who's my Overbrook people?
Is Colt playing too?
Okay,
Is she Overbrook or is she, what is she?
She's at
What
large.
is
She's
Jamie?
she's at large.
Okay.
We'll get there in a second.
Yeah, we're Overbrook.
I know, which one?
I can be here, I can.
Well, my son has a game, but I'm kind of in the same boat as Jamie.
I'm
There
gonna-
really is not one single day of the week that's gonna consistently
Okay,
work.
well then let's pick someone else, Kylie, it's okay. I mean, if,
The guilt is so real.
well, you can participate in a different way, right?
Yes,
You're a board member, you represent, you can.
yeah, I am good, if she can
And
make
we'll get
it,
you
I'm good with
information.
that. Yeah.
Okay, Amy. All right, Carbondale?
It's me and you. You said it first, you go.
Alright, I'll pick
All right.
22nd.
You said the dates you're at.
Okay, I've got Michelle, Amy, and Justin at the first steering committee meeting. I will reach out to all these people, get them informed, set the date, time.
Where are we doing this at?
I think we could do it in a gym. I think that would be nice, set up tables. You wanna do it here in this gym here? We don't have a lot of conflicts with this gym. We don't have anything on Thursday, the 22nd here. Okay.
And like 6 o'clock is
comment?
adequate time.
Can I make a suggestion to do it at the high school, just because so many of the questions are reconfiguring in the high school layout? If there's people on the steering committee that maybe don't have that visibility on the triangle classrooms and that
Sure,
might make
yeah.
that easier.
To do some facility walks, sure, yeah, that's a good idea.
Works at the high school that cause any problems, I don't know. During
Have what?
meetings.
I only thought this one because there's not a lot of conflict of activities, but if it's May 22nd, we're not gonna have a
No,
conflict.
yeah,
done.
School's out, we'll be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. It's good to rotate those meetings too. The first one is a lot about just the process and what we're doing, and then getting into the detail and when to do some tours.
Yeah. Okay, so high school, 6 o'clock. May 22nd, regional track. Okay. Okay. That might hurt my administrative, won't hurt her, I don't think. Or me. No, that won't affect you. Okay. It might affect, Kyle. So, but it's okay, we'll figure it out. I'll work with
Are
them.
we expecting our administrators to be there?
I'm expecting 3 of them to be there, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I would like each lead principal to be there, and if a lead can't be there, I'd like an assistant to be there.
Austin.
Austin,
You read all of them, I
yeah.
think.
Yes, he can.
He's like, are you kidding me?
I was just like,
Our conflict, it's only me.
It's just like dad and daycare.
Yeah. And then, just so everybody knows, like, staff has also filled out the interest form, so they're included in this as well. The only people that probably haven't filled it out are board members and administrators, so. But
So
teachers
we're-
and staff have signed up too.
So you're gonna put together this committee, keep it around the 30 and try to make sure it's equal through the towns,
Yep,
whatever.
yep.
And if you need whatever, more people from Carbondale or Overbrook, you can reach out to us and see if we can recruit people.
Yep.
And you'll give us, where you'll just do that?
Yep.
And then do you need something to say, are we partnering with these folks? Do you need to vote for that or?
Sure.
Cause you guys are gonna help through
Oh,
the
yeah.
steering committees, correct?
Absolutely, we'll be there.
So.
Did we not already partner with them?
I didn't know how
I
far
think
we
we're
had
good. I mean,
gone.
I guess I'm not positive, but I think that we should be good just to move forward.
Yeah, you had made a comment to me one time that you would like to say whether or not we're moving forward here or not. So
Sure.
that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
If we don't need to do anything official, that's fine with me.
Yeah. And I know we made that programmatic study resolution with them, which I feel like we've gotten through a lot of that and more. And then we've got Mr. Kelly here, so I think there'll be very helpful resources through the steering committee process.
Yes, definitely.
The only comment I would have maybe for you is if the steering committee gives feedback that it's leaning towards a 3 campus, we might figure those numbers roughly or something.
Yep.
Because people are gonna wanna know. I mean,
I agree.
a lot of people are
That's
gonna
what I-
vote with their checkbook.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Happy to do that.
And I feel like, yeah, and I did appreciate updated drawings and some of
Yeah.
that, but I feel like maybe we need another, like a 3 campus. I mean, I feel like the election really helped.
Yeah, well, yeah, we've already got it
Yep.
developed,
Yeah,
so
they're
just throwing it back in the mix.
Okay.
I also liked in the financial how you did the daily rates.
Get
more
down to
palatable.
the
It's only
penny.
20 cents a day.
So for this first May meeting, who
Does anybody else have anything else, any suggestions or
Agenda,
questions?
help with the agenda, or you doing the
I'll
agenda?
work with them, yep, they'll give me some guidance on that and what we do at the first meeting, I think there's gonna be a lot of education, logistics
Yeah,
of
where
the
we've
meeting,
been, what
where
we're
we've
doing.
been, where we're going, just update people.
Yeah.
Because there'll be people on this, there's definitely people on here that I've never seen at a board meeting, I'm not sure they're listening to board meetings, I'm hoping they are, that are not.
People that don't know a lot of stuff.
Sure, and they're not
Yeah.
necessarily still actively in the school district with kids or grandkids and things like that. So there's gonna be a lot of some repeated information too that you guys know, but not everybody knows, and we'll need to make sure that's out there, so. Any other?
Thank you, guys.
Can I get a copy of,
Mm-hmm.
do you have
Yep.
notes? Okay,
Yeah.
can you
Yeah,
email
that would be
to
very
you?
helpful.
Yeah.
Writing notes or something.
Yep.
And
And then, you digital of
give
this,
you-
digital of this,
Cliff notes.
that will be good, and it's be good
So
for
read over
for
most
people
of the
to have.
last
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
I know where
You
it
guys
is.
have anything else?
Mine was not,
We have a executive session.
Yes. Thank you, folks.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all my answers and everything.
responded to the Friday night.
Fixing the lights, fixing the lights.
How
How much time?
are you gonna need?
I always say 15 and you always say 20, so
20
that
minutes.
gives 20 minutes.
We're not gonna ask no more, we're just gonna go 20.
Mr. President, I move we go into executive session to discuss personnel pursuant to non-elected personnel exception or comment in the open.
I just meant that, sorry, I sent you
Resume
one at
the
11 o'clock at
room
night.
at 8 o'clock with Faith Lloyd present.
I say our administrators.
They're in that folder, so.
Okay, we have a motion,
She
Yeah,
said.
second.
motion and a second,
Oh, no, I was second.
second,
Jamie has.
all in favor?
Else go home?
Hey, administrators, you wanna go home? Second. Second, all in favor?
Why are you looking at me, Michelle? I don't know, I just been directing.
You're still here. All right, that's all you got, right?
That's all I got.
We're adjourned.
Okay. Yes.